Welcome. We are so pleased to have you with us today. My name is Joe Swimmer. I'm the Executive Director of the SEEP Network, and we are thrilled to have you in this session on social media, saintly or sinful. And we have a terrific panel of folks lined up to share their thinking and expertise, and moderated by our good friend Jamon from North Carolina down in Raleigh, and we are looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jamon and thank our panel, and we look forward to having you all join us on another session soon. Take good care.
Thanks, Joe. Good day, all. I welcome you to this digital workshop sponsored by the SEEP Network and Heart Edge Network, a network out of St. Martin in the Fields, London, entitled Social Media, Saintly or Sinful, the Church's People and Social Media Today. My name is Jamon Taylor, and I am rector of St. Ambrose Episcopal Church, Raleigh, North Carolina. I am honored to moderate this discussion with such illustrious panelists, including the Reverend Ann Beverly, Vicar of Christ Church in Wesham, England, TikTok extraordinaire, the Reverend Daniel Brereton, priest in the Anglican Church of Canada at St. John the Baptist, Dixie, near Toronto, Canada. He is a Twitter titan. Dr. Heidi Campbell, professor of communications at Texas A&M University, Gig'em, and vice president of Society, Media, Religion, and Culture. The Reverend Tim Skank, Episcopal priest, blogger, syndicated columnist, author, and rector of the Episcopal Parish of St. John the Evangelist, Hingham, Massachusetts, who is also responsible for Lent Madness, and Alan Yarborough, Church Relations Officer for the Episcopal Church Office of Government Relations. Social media offers Christians an opportunity to live out our calling to share the good news of Jesus Christ, and yet there is an underside. I will invite each panelist to share for 3 to 5 minutes regarding the topic. There will be a period of question and answer that follows. Feel free to type questions or comments in the chat box. We will do our best to address those questions. And before we dive in, I offer this prayer for communications I've adapted. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Holy Spirit, you blessed the first disciples with the power to spread God's love throughout the world. Give us a new power to proclaim your word through our own unique gifts and through the channels of clear communications on social media. Make us willing to receive that word as it enters our daily lives. Bless all who use their talents in the field of communications. Guide those who send out the message and those who receive it, so that all people may come to know your truth and be renewed by your love. We ask this through Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen. Please share with us, Vicar Ann.
Hi, well, my name's Anne, and I look after a small church in the northwest of England. My relationship with social media began actually quite a long time ago. I decided that I needed to be quite heavily involved in social media, absolutely nothing to do with the church, but because of my children. At that point, I'd got 2 young children, and through various pastoral encounters that I had within my work through the church, I realized that teenagers especially, but also young adults, were really struggling with some of the mental health issues around social media, and issues around bullying and other things. And so I decided that the best way to protect my own children from the difficulties or the dangers, I guess, of social media is to be on social media. And so I made sure that from quite an early age, whatever platform my kids were involved in, I was there first. And I've continued that. A couple of years ago, I was on TikTok just to keep my eye on what they were doing, really. And I realized that, especially on TikTok, and this may be have quite a lot to do with the type of social media it is, there's some really great stuff on there, and there's some stuff that's really not terribly nice. Certainly some stuff that as a Christian parent, I don't really want my kids to be involved in. But I quickly came to the realization that I can't stop that. I can't take them off that platform. I didn't feel that that was the right thing to do. And so I realized that maybe there was a need to put some good content out there. I can't get rid of the bad. I can't stop them seeing the bad, but I can give them an alternative. And I can provide an alternative to the young people in my own congregation and in my own church. So that's what we started to do. And at the beginning, we weren't really taking it very seriously. We were putting an odd post, maybe once or twice a week, and we had 15 followers. And all of those 15 followers, well, 2 of them were my own children, and the rest of those followers were people who belonged to my church, who were young people within our church. And one day I recorded just a very silly video to a piece of music that actually isn't terribly good, which I later discovered. And this video went viral. We watched over a couple of days, which was probably the most exciting 2 days ever, whilst this video reached sort of a couple of million views. And from there, our followers started to go up. People started to watch what we were doing. So off the basis of that, we sort of got ourselves together and decided that we probably needed to take this quite seriously, and that if people wanted to watch what we were putting out, then this was a God-given opportunity to tell people who, quite frankly, don't always know about Jesus and aren't necessarily Christians, that actually God loves you and he cares for you and he wants a relationship with you. And part of the nature, especially of TikTok, is that the videos are very short. And so you do not have lots of time to put a great big long theological debate about something. You've only got a few seconds. And so the messages that we put out are short, sharp. God loves you, God cares for you. Christians are good people generally, we're happy people, we have lots of fun. And that's it. What we then did was we signpost people then into other social media sites, to signpost them into, if they want to explore the faith more, then they can go and look on our YouTube channel and they can explore the faith there, and we can signpoint them into going through faith courses and eventually making commitments. But that's not what our YouTube channel is. Our YouTube channel is just telling people that God loves them.
Thanks so much, Anne. Reverend Daniel?
Well, so I'm on various social media platforms, but I'm probably most active on Twitter. It's where I probably have the most following and do most of my ministry. I was thinking about this the other day. I think I've been on Twitter now about 9 years, although it doesn't seem like that long. It's really only been the last, I'd say, 3 to 4 years that I think I've become as active as I have. And originally I wasn't interested. And my husband was on Twitter and I didn't understand it. I was like, it's so fast and everything has to be so brief, and I'm not brief. And I'm trying to keep in mind that I have 3 minutes. And like, I just didn't get the point. And then as I stayed on Twitter and I shared more of myself, I started getting a lot of messages, tweets and direct messages from people wanting to talk, because as well as being Christian, as well as being a priest in the church, and having a parish, I'm also gay, and I was open about that. And I started getting a lot of messages from people going, I want to talk about this, either my own struggles with sexuality or someone I love, or my struggles with the church and the institution you represent. And I had never gone on Twitter with the intention. It's kind of like what Anne was saying. I mean, originally my intention on going on social media wasn't about ministry. I didn't see that as an extension of ministry. I just was curious and I wanted to engage with people. But as people realized who I am, I realized that I couldn't separate myself from my ministry. and I couldn't separate my ministry from what I was doing on social media. And I think the other thing where I relate to what Anne was saying is that I came to see it as an opportunity to present an alternative, because so much of what I was seeing, the dominant Christian voice, often in media of any kind, is of a certain type of Christianity that I don't relate to, that a lot of people are turned off by. And I wanted to provide an alternative. But it meant that it meant sharing more of myself, because I also realized people, although my church has a Twitter account and social media pages, and I kind of run those as well, people don't want to engage with an institution or an organization. They want to engage with people. So even if they're engaging with a church or an organizational website, they still want a sense of the person or a person behind it. And you have to be willing to let them get to know some of you, like parts of you. And the more that you can bring yourself to it, the more you're giving people permission to be themselves, which is something that a lot of people don't experience in the church. So yeah, where am I? Am I at my 3 minutes yet? So my experience on Twitter has been wonderful in the sense that it certainly it allows for engagement and reach that you would just not normally have in a parish. I mean, COVID has forced all of us to go online. I put up my first YouTube channel like a year ago, started, recording services, but connecting that with my social media. So that's been good, because we get a lot of views to our services because I can channel that through my Twitter. But what I've discovered is that there's the blessing and curse, the saintly and sinful side of the internet is often two sides of the same coin. On one hand, it's expanded my reach and I can reach more people and I have more resources I can draw on, but it also means that more people can reach me. And that's one of the things that I've struggled with is boundaries around pastoral ministry, because suddenly the size of my congregation has grown exponentially. And I suddenly feel all of this responsibility for hundreds and hundreds of people who have engaged with me, sent me prayer requests, talked to me about what they're going through. And I only have so much time. So, suddenly I'll wake up in the middle of the night realizing, oh, Anne on Twitter, who talked to me about surgery that she's having upcoming, I haven't checked in with her to see how that went. So there's some struggles around boundaries and how you balance that. But for the most part, it's been a wonderful opportunity to minister to people in ways that I would never have expected.
Thank you, Reverend Daniel. Professor Campbell?
Sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't have my mic on there at the first. So I've been studying the internet for the last 25 years and looking at how especially Jewish, Muslim, and Christian groups present, use, and respond to new technologies. And a lot of that time I have spent looking at how the church has used digital technology. And this meme that I have up here kind of really summarizes the research that I've done, or just the perspective of how the church has changed so drastically, especially in the last 18 months. We see it says pastors in 2010, Facebook is from the devil, but 2020, follow our services live on Facebook. In the last 18 months, we've seen an extreme amount of change as churches have been forced to, in many ways, go online. And this has created some new possibilities for creativity, but also kind of raised anxiety levels for many people. Just like it says on the second meme, I'm glad we were able to attend church again, but I do miss the ability to fast forward and mute. Many religious leaders are feeling anxious about what this kind of time of being online is going to do to the church, as well as people's perception of the church. So over the last 18 months, I've been spending a lot of time talking to pastors and interacting with them about how they're using digital media, what they're learning, and what some of the challenges are. And one of the main themes that's kind of come out in some of those studies and work that I've done is that digital technology is now seen as really vital for contemporary ministry. Even if you're not embracing it fully and using every social media platform, understanding it, like Anne has told us, is very important because it's the world that our students, our young people swim in. And so incorporating technology into the church is important, but it requires a level of awareness of the media, digital literacy, and digital culture. And this is an area the church and religious groups definitely need to expand in. And we've also seen over the last 18 months that there's been some awesome creativity and experimentation happening. Many lessons have been learned the hard way about what social media platform best to use or how best to give a sermon or a service online. But that creativity has really shown how the church can respond in dynamic and in troubled times to crises. And it's also showed that, church is not a one-man show. The pastor couldn't do it all. Tech teams, volunteers were essential for doing that work. And it showed that this digital age is going to require a new level of creativity as well as collaboration. So over my last 20 years, as I've been looking at how different religious communities have responded to technology, I've learned a couple of common things. And one thing is interesting I found in my research in the book I did, When Religion Meets New Media, is that progressive Muslims, evangelical Christians, and Lubavitch Jews have one thing in common. It's how they use the internet. Their kind of desire to bring people to faith and into conversation with their community motivates their use of technology. And so by looking at kind of not just how religious groups respond within one tradition, but how different communities respond with certain sense of mission, I found that, religious communities' choices about technology in sometimes unconscious ways are influenced by their history, by their core beliefs, and the contemporary moment or context they find themselves in. And just as we've seen as churches have been forced, so have mosques and synagogues have been had to negotiate with these new technologies. So how do you kind of respond, not just in the practical ways, but kind of, to the challenges that the digital media and social media pose for us? Well, in my book, Network Theology, I try to help churches and religious leaders to think through how do we create a faith-focused use of media? And I kind of say there's two principles that we need to keep in mind. One is you need to be really aware of what your core values are. Not just kind of what the Bible says or what, the kind of principles of the Westminster Catechism, for example, but you really need to know kind of how those principles, that scripture translates into kind of guidelines and boundaries for life, to say, what will I accept, what won't I accept, what things will bring me closer to my faith community, and what things might push me away from my relationship with God. And so knowing those core beliefs then requires churches and individuals to create a media mission statement. And this is where kind of a map of what is the acceptable use of technology under certain circumstances, what will we see as problematic and need to resist, and how might we need to change the media environment or change the way we use the media so it's in line with those core beliefs. So I don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to leave you with a couple kind of practical principles. And so, to the question, social media, is it saintly or sinful? I would say yes, it's both. It can be both and it can be either. And I'm sure we'll talk about that more. But how do we respond? How do we think about developing a theology of technology or just a mission map for using media? Well, I like to use when I work with churches, the verse from Micah, verse 6-8, what does the Lord require of us? To do justly, to love mercy, and walk humbly. So justice in a very basic ways means we're called to speak truth, but the truth with love. And that is a big challenge in our current digital age. And showing people through action with not just what we say, but how we say it is very important in social media. Mercy can be translated as communicating care with our words. So kind of treating the person on the other side of the screen, not as an object, not as an argument to be won, but as an actual person who has feelings and is a child of God is really important. And to be in that kind of mindset of how can I be God? How can I minister to that person? And then also, how do we show respect to others in our attitude? How do we live truly humbly? So it's not we're trying to say, to buy into the celebrity culture of social media, encouraging us to kind of say, look at me, but pointing others to look to God and through our actions and attitudes online, showing the respect for the others who are different than us. And so I hope that these kind of things give you a little insight into some of the things I've studied the last 25 years and a few kind of starting point principles to have a conversation, especially with your congregation, about digital media. Thanks.
Thank you. Father Tim?
Well, hello, I'm Tim, at Father Tim on Twitter. I'm the one who has 7 times fewer followers than at Rev Daniel. So just to be clear, who is the Twitter titan on here? I want to start by just asking the question, why do you use social media? I always think it's important to think about that question before you start posting or tweeting or TikToking or Snapchatting or whatever your particular medium is. It's, you know, there at one level, I think we in the church do this stuff because that's where the people are. I like to say that that the internet, that social media, that's the new town square. That's where everybody congregates and gathers. It's also the medium that we have that we can use to be ourselves and to share the gospel. So Paul had letters, right? So he wrote letters. Well, we can tweet, and I think that there are some real parallels there. But for so many of us, it's just social media has just become so much a part of our daily routine that we've stopped thinking about why we use it. And I think that's important because it impacts how we use social media. We may use it for work. We may use it to keep up with our grandchildren. We may use it for fun. We may use it to challenge or inspire. In reality, it's probably some combination of all of these, but we all tend to have some primary reasons that we use social media. So for instance, I use social media to amuse and to challenge and inspire and to mock and to hopefully make God known and to share God's love in ways that are both subtle and overt. But people are complicated. You know, I'm complicated, but the key, I think, is authenticity. And people may take it or they may leave it, they may unfollow you, they may block you, but you really just, I think, have to be yourself and find your voice on social media. I mean, so many of the things that we say to young preachers revolve around finding your voice in the pulpit. Well, I think the same is true for social media, and that can take some time. Daniel was talking about how he didn't really get Twitter at first, and neither did I. And I think the same is with every platform. Every platform is different. And so maybe there's something you might post on Twitter that would be a different post on Facebook. I don't think that you can do every one of these platforms really well. I know for me, it's Facebook and Twitter, and I hack around on Instagram. But I think they all have different ways that each personality that we bring to this might make you a better fit for one or the other. So, you know, I just think that your social media account really should be an extension of who you genuinely are, because people will sniff authenticity out from a mile away. So here's an example. I sometimes warn people not to tweet like a bishop. And I say bishops because I found that many of their social media accounts are just incredibly banal. Now, I get that they're under unique pressures, but at a certain point, they become so risk averse and so unwilling to offend anyone that they literally don't tweet anything except things like, oh, it was great to be with the people of St. Swithin's today. And then there's a picture of them in fancy vestments with a bunch of confirmands. That's great, but how is that communicating the gospel? So unless your aim is to bore people to death, that's just not really compelling. So I'd much rather see a picture of a miter that fell on the ground with the caption, "Oops." Because to me that breaks open the institutional veneer of the church and shows us someone who is humble and fallible and faithful. Of course, I also like to tell people that my time on social media is basically spent undoing my chances for ecclesiastical advancement one tweet at a time. So there's that as well. But I do enjoy social media, and yes, there's a dark side, but I love the interactions with people that I would never otherwise have met. I love the concept of expanding the pulpit and inspiring or amusing people. And I love highlighting the infallibility of an institution that I dearly love and that I always hope will strive to do better.
Thank you. Alan?
Sure, thanks. It's good to be with you all today. And I come from this in the work of the Office of Government Relations, and we do political advocacy for the Episcopal Church to the U.S. government. And so it's in that context that I'm approaching this topic. And I think at the risk of being overly diplomatic, is social media saintly or sinful? I think it depends as well. And I think it depends really on two key things. First, our expectations for what it can and cannot do, and how we handle sort of our social media personas that may be different from our real personas. So I'll talk about the first one, on our expectations. I think social media, even with a variety of platforms that have different uses, it's really just, they're all tools. And like any tool, they're not always suited to every task. And I think we need to moderate our expectations, accordingly. In our work, I've used social media successfully for communal moments that have helped people grapple with, difficult and sometimes traumatic topics. We did this during, we had a 12-hour virtual vigil on family separation several years ago, where we had tens of thousands of people join us on Facebook Live with hardly a single negative comment or negative response. And we also did this for an overnight sort of election watch vigil on election night this past year in the US, and again, had an overwhelmingly response from the thousands that joined that. And I think on different scales, our parishes across the country are doing this on Sunday mornings quite successfully. It's not a replacement for in-person worship, and events, but there's still something really amazing there. And I've also seen and used social media to raise awareness on an issue, to educate others, educate myself, and inspire action. And we've seen positive examples of this around the world, I think, where social media can help in emergency contexts, it can help in efforts to fight oppression as well. But it can also do simple things like helping us connect with old friends and family members. But I think my main critique on social media then is that it seems to be pretty awful at facilitating civil discourse. In our office's civil discourse training, we define the concept as conversation to enhance understanding. And at the core of that practice are curiosity and humility with conviction. And people engaging on social media, especially on issues where nuance and nonverbal communication may make all the difference. Social media seems remarkably bad, or people seem to be remarkably bad on social media at being curious and practicing humility. And civil discourse too, I think, assumes a desire to be in relationship with one another, and it requires leaning in close. And on social media, with our words public, with others chiming in at will, we may not actually desire such a relationship or have the ability to lean in and close through social media. And in some ways, I kind of think this is a transition to my second point. Social media is like everyone's personal C-SPAN. It distorts our conversations to an extent between people into opportunities for capturing, the public eye. Where what's important in certain moments is how we're perceived publicly rather than the topic at hand or even the person with which we're engaging. So when we're on social media, I think we're constantly monitoring our own words, knowing that we may be judged or even encouraged by others publicly in ways that could be harmful. And so again, to my second point, the social media versus real personas, I can really only speak to this anecdotally. There are people out there who have studied this, but in my experience, for one reason or another, people develop these online personas that change how they interact and engage with others. Maybe that's from a lack of established norms for how we should behave on social media. It hasn't been around all that long in the grand scheme of things. Perhaps it's deliberate or unintentional, psychological manipulation by the platforms themselves, and speak to that. But at the end of the day, what we end up with, I think, is not just an environment where there are other nefarious actors who may be trying to influence us, an environment with platforms that have proven to be incredibly effective tools at disseminating disinformation, but our caricatures, they're trying to navigate engaging with other caricatures, just sometimes doesn't work out well. And I think sometimes that can extend to our email practices, to reviews of our churches or organizations or restaurants, online as well. And so I think that the essence of that to me is that we're not often our real selves on social media. So, Tim, what you mentioned is that I think resonates. It's important to try to be our real selves as much as we can. Or we, maybe if we're not our real selves, we're not our whole selves, which means we may not be genuine. And I think we have that same suspicion of others, that they're also not being genuine on social media. So is social media good or bad? I think it depends on our expectations for it, our awareness of its limitations, and an acknowledgement, that we have this public persona that sometimes leads to some weird dynamics.
Thanks so much, Alan, and all the other experts on the Zoom call. I want to throw this out there. What would have been Jesus' social media handle or hashtag?
I think that he would have. I think he would have said something like hashtag love God, hashtag love your neighbor, because virtually every single thing that he posts, you could put one of those hashtags to. But I think maybe his human side might have come out, and especially looking at the world today, you might put the hashtag, "Are you not even listening to me?" So I don't know. Maybe he would be a little bit crosser with us, perhaps. I don't know.
That's great. He also clearly would have only had 12 followers. So, yeah.
I think go ahead, Tim.
I'm partial to at JDog, but I don't know what his handle would have been.
I think you would have been at the real Jesus or real Son of God, and also use the hashtag a lot, not Jesus. There's a great set of memes out there called Storytime Jesus, where it has hashtag things Jesus did not say. And so I think, that sometimes it's important also not just to say what Jesus would do, but what he wouldn't do on social media. And that's, being unkind to people.
Yeah, I think he would have used the hashtag a lot, like hashtag did I stutter, because he's said it and we just still don't seem to be getting it. But yeah, I think he would have focused a lot on correcting and redefining what he said, because we have done such a bad job of sharing the good news as he actually shared it with the world. So
I also think he would have been a master subtweeter.
I hope so, because then I feel less judged by
Yeah.
doing that myself. So,
Well, there's an element too. I think. Jesus was very much about action as well, and we can take action on social media, but taking that off of social media is critical. And so I think he would be. That's not a hashtag necessarily, but I think that would be part of his approach here.
Good stuff. One question that came from an attendee: all the speakers characterize social mediums as a basically neutral forum, like a room where people gather. However, the room is owned by multinational corporations who employ psychologists who understand addiction deeply and design the platforms accordingly. Is the platform itself sinful or at least deeply problematic?
well, I think, oh, sorry, I just jumped in. Would anyone else like to speak? Sorry. Like I said, I'm not brief. The world itself is a sinful platform, and yet God chooses to act within it. I hear the concerns about that, and I think that we do need to be aware of what's all behind the platforms, but it is how we use them, and it's about the content that we're putting on there. That can only be manipulated so much. So yes, the platforms have some inbuilt problems, but so does the world we live in, and yet the church is still called to act within it and put good stuff out there. So.
Yeah, that resonates with me, and I think there are ways we can mitigate those issues through there are deliberate ways we can combat misinformation or disinformation, and I think there are also, I mean, there's the physical cost of social media and posting pictures and an environmental cost to that in terms of the infrastructure that it takes, not just for our cell phones and the devices that we use, but the memory banks that are used to store and run our social media and hold all of the data that we're putting out there. So I think there needs to be an awareness for that impact as well.
Mm.
I think one of the challenges is, and like we've said, that it's a two-edged sword, and every digital platform is built to do something well. Like Facebook is really good about building a social network and connecting with people you know. It's not as good for maybe kind of in-depth discussions. You need to use a blog for like that. So every digital technology, just like every technology in general, has some strengths and has weaknesses. The challenge is that in the clickbait world, corporations are saying, hey, what uses do people use that we can monetize? Social media platforms are all about, they weren't always developed for altruistic purposes. A lot of them started out that way, but now are about money. And so we have to realize that when people have those intentions, they try to exploit the kind of negative, addictive side of the technology, as well as, this will help amplify your voice. You can become a celebrity, you can become an authority, which can be very kind of tempting. And I think, that's, things that we need to watch out. How do we cultivate the positive things that social media allows us to do? And then how do we kind of critique and respond to the negative traits and characteristics it encourages?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that that social media is absolutely not perfect, but nothing is really perfect. And I think that there are certain things that I dislike strongly about the social media platforms that I like and that I use. But if I wish to be a force for change, I've got to be involved in it. I can't sit on the outside, not have a Twitter account, a TikTok account, and criticize it. I actually need to be in it and amongst it in order to be able to influence it, hopefully for good. And many of the negatives about social media, especially around the damages to mental health, specifically for teenagers, a lot of those can be addressed, and we can support people through the social media itself by putting content out there that says it's okay not to believe what people say about you on social media, and to make that a thing within the content that I place. I don't think I can stand outside of social media and criticize it. I have to be of it. But it does also worry me on occasions, and it does infuriate me on occasions as well.
I would also say on the positive side is that digital relationships are real relationships. Now, I'm not a big hugger, so I love Zoom. This is great. I don't have to hug any of you, but there have been people that I have gotten to know on social media, and then I meet in real life for the first time, and I hug them. Now, I don't really hug strangers a whole lot. But I think it speaks to the fact that that some good also is there, and it's easy to focus on the negative, and believe me, there's a tremendous amount of that. But there's also some great value in these relationships as well.
I think for me, and I'm just noticing a question in the chat room about where did it go? It went up something, but how do you combat the negative? That Christianity for a lot of people has such a negative, such negative connotations. Church, people have been very hurt and abused by that. I was tweeting about this just today, and I think that it's incumbent on us to put the alternative out there. I don't use Twitter to try and win back those that have turned away from the church, because it's not about defending the abuser or trying to justify myself or doing not all churches or not all clergy. It's about witnessing to a different kind of Christianity, a different way of being Christian, and an inclusive gospel. And if people are drawn to that and they want to talk to you about that, you're making yourself available to do that. But I think, you know, it's about incarnation for me. We talked about authenticity and bringing yourself to the platform. And I think, you know, Jesus, as well as preaching, I mean, mainly what Jesus did, as Alan was saying, is he got out there and he just did it. So rather than just writing blog posts about a different kind of Christianity, you witness to that by how you engage with people on Facebook, on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter. And that's what draws people. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
I think go ahead, Heidi.
I think it's about, you know, the church using this creativity to kind of, instead of just like, how do we kind of combat, but how do we actually go in the opposite spirit? I think there's so many creative things that people can do, you know, with creating Facebook groups that are kind of promote positive things. You know, there's this huge kindness movement kind of worldwide. Well, how can we, you know, show Christian kindness in the way we treat others and, you know, develop kind of alternatives? I mean, there is a space to speak truth and love, but sometimes I think we focus more on the kind of fighting back versus the kind of giving the alternate and giving and basically showcasing or modeling what Christian communication could look like online.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think an important dynamic to this is, you know, I've said this before, but to recognize when to take something offline, when to have the follow-up be in a different context, because again, social media it's not going to solve everything, and it's not meant for everything. It can be incredibly useful. And I like the examples you gave early on of like, let me put something positive content out here. I think there can be a great benefit to that. But then sometimes we've got to turn that into something a little more intimate, whether that's a conversation over the phone, you know, over Zoom, inviting somebody, hey, you know, maybe you don't want to come for the service. We have coffee hour at this time, whatever that may be, whatever that looks like, knowing how to take it from one line and going deeper with somebody, I think can be really useful. And social media can really help facilitate that. It can facilitate that those initial connections, in particular, familiarity, the message, and the education in a helpful way.
And I just want to add to what Alan's saying there, and it ties to what something Tim said about relationships online are real. And although I've done a lot of sort of helping people find a church in their local community that, you know, what they thought they found with me, I try to help them find in real life, in real time. But that for a lot of people, the connections they make and those communities they develop online are very real. And that's one of the things that I've realized over this past year doing church online. I have people that come to my Bible studies that watch us online. They're never going to come to my building, either because they don't want to or they can't, they're too far away. But that doesn't stop them from feeling like my church is their church and I am their pastor. And that's as real to them as the people sitting in physical pews in my building. And I think we have to kind of get used to that community happens in different spaces, and online space is different, but it's no less real or valid than in person. And applying the same kind of values and things to that online community as we do to the people here. It's not just about getting people into our buildings. Somebody, Ray, put a question in the chat room about the problem I face is that the people who engage online won't come to the building. And my question is, why is that important? They don't need to come to your building to be part of your community, to hear the gospel, to benefit from your ministry.
Yeah, it really is blowing the lid off of what we know, the vessel that we've always assumed is the church. Yes. And I think that's, you know, there's this terrible word. I hate this word. I came across phygital, P-H-Y, whatever. But basically the concept is linking the physical brick and mortar with the digital space and these two spaces and how this is what we're really doing with hybrid ministry and hybrid church, and social media has been a really important piece of that. And so yeah, this last year and a half has shown just how much that interplay goes on between the two.
Somebody's asked a question about older people and not engaging with technology very much, and a lot of Episcopal/Anglican /mainline congregations are a lot of older people. But one of the surprising things is I've found older people do want to engage with technology, but they're afraid and they don't know how, and they need to be shown how to do it. But once they do, I mean, they can be as active and engaged with it as younger people. So let's not assume that just because a person is a certain age, this has no relevance to them.
Well, if my mother can figure out how to join my digital services, I have talked to her about not commenting during the sermon, but nonetheless,
mute mother.
Yeah, exactly. But it's I don't know. What I've seen is a great opportunity for intergenerational connection, and so we've had some younger people who have been tech support for some older people, and that's been really a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah.
That's very much been our experience. When we looked originally like we were going into lockdown because of COVID, where the church buildings were going to be closed, we stood up at the front of church on one Sunday morning and said, guess what? If we go into lockdown, which it looks like we're going to, if you want to join our services, you need to be accessing us on social media. If you don't know how to do that, let us know. And we sent out a group of people who, over the course of a couple of weeks, visited everybody who wasn't already on social media and literally sat down next to them and showed them how to do it. And this, it was a great solution for us in our situation. But the ramifications of that have been absolutely huge, because now we've got a group of predominantly people who are over the age of 70 who are my TikTok prayers. So there's a group, there's about 15 of them, and they have all got a TikTok account, and the only person they tend to follow is me. But what they do is every couple of days they jump onto our TikTok account, they go through the comments and they pray for people. So when people have asked for prayer, they pray for those people. When people have put abusive or unkind comments on, they pray for those people. And so, you know, I know that because it's physically impossible for me to manage that. It's too big for one person to manage. But I've got this lovely group of elderly people who are my TikTok prayers. The other great thing about it is that they have started to work out that their grandchildren are also on TikTok, and their great grandchildren are on TikTok. And you are absolutely the coolest grandma if you are following your grandchildren on TikTok. So that's really helped us as well. But we've found the opposite. We've found that when we enable people to use social media, it opened people's world. They were able to connect with family that they weren't able to connect to during lockdown. It's been a tremendous force for good within our older congregation.
I think one of the challenges that it's presented, certainly for me, is that a lot of people don't have the technical abilities to you know, and so a lot of it's fallen on me, you know, to manage the social media accounts, to post, to be engaged with people. And so that's been one of the challenges, is realizing that one person, one minister, one small worship team can't do all of this. So it also breaks down those hierarchies in terms of other people and being engaged in the ministry, because you simply need more people than just maybe the one or two paid staff in a lot of churches who can run everything and do all of that.
And one of the challenges too there are absolutely communities that don't have the infrastructure to do this. And I think that's one of the challenges of this church. Someone once said, if we come out of the pandemic and the only churches that are still thriving are white, wealthy ones, we've lost our way. Yeah. And so I just think that that's something that we really need to be mindful of as well.
And I think in a digital world, there's not a one size fits all, just like Anne was saying, sometimes it's kind of combining, kind of face to face with the online. I know that some churches, I've pastors had to kind of, they did the online service and then they did a lot of phone calls or face to face, or, visits on the porch, as it were. And so kind of basically meeting people where they're at and seeing that, maybe your church can't do everything, but we don't have to be dependent on one church being an expert in everything. There's resources that we can kind of share and see it as a collaborative community experience, and not just I have the one pastor that has to do everything digital.
Well, that's also one of the other things I think that's come out of the pandemic, and is the need for churches to be collaborative, and that we're not. Hopefully, it's breaking. I mean, I think the social media thing has in some ways created more competition. It's like, who has the better Facebook page, who's got the better live stream, and we can all look at each other's services and judge how they're doing compared to us. And that was one of the challenges for me, is the pressure that puts on us, because you feel like you're more in competition. Your parishioners can check out other places that they might like better. But it also invites us to be more collaborative and realize, like, no, our church doesn't have the resources or maybe the talent for this, but the church down the road does. And together, what can we do? So I'm hoping that comes out of all of this as well, a more collaborative ministry between congregations and churches.
Yeah, and I, thinking back to the prayer, I'm grateful for the communications prayer at the beginning of the session today. I'm on the board of Episcopal communicators, and I know that network is incredibly stressed because so much of our church communication has suddenly been channeled through them. So I know some of us are individually on social media, but that's different than sort of the institutional perspective. How do we represent our parish and channel our services and have everything go through communication staff when often the capacity has not been increased? So the expectations are higher, but not the capacity. And so I think that room for collaboration and creativity can be hard when we're overwhelmed. But I agree, Daniel, that's something I'm hoping for that will come out of this, is how have we learned to be more nimble? How can we learn from each other and work together on something between Episcopal churches or even with other communities of faith too?
One of the questions that keeps coming up, and I think we should address it, is the issue, privacy issues, especially with people live streaming and people like me tweeting about my congregation and what's going on. I mean, how do we navigate privacy? Anyway, so I'll just throw that out there. Others?
I think one of the challenges, and this isn't an answer that people are going to like, but that, we live in a world that, if you say anything, do anything, not just online, but offline, you no longer own it. And I think especially churches used to, like, I say the message, the pastor, it comes in the nice package and you just accept it or reject it as is. I say something right now, this can become a soundbite that you put on your phone, that you're going to make a t-shirt, you make a meme out of it because of the digital flexibility. And I think one thing is learning kind of the opportunities, but the challenges that you're going to have with, privacy issues, how can you kind of inform people about, what if the service is going to go online? How do you use camera angles maybe to give the most privacy to people? When is it appropriate or not appropriate at all to post pictures of especially children in your congregation? I think there's a lot of basic kind of issues that we need to think about that you didn't have to think about, because the only people who got the parish newsletter were those people in the parish versus it being seen by everybody. So I think, it's being aware that it's much more complex and messy and that you won't have as much control. So that means just doing a lot of thoughtful planning beforehand about how you're going to especially put services, content, and images online.
Yeah, and adding to that, it's sort of a tangent, but I think it's related, is the fact that there are parts of, within the US at least, there are parts of the country that don't even have internet access, where the church is active. And so in some ways, social media is and isn't a factor in worship there. And so I think I would just add that to the list that great list, Heidi, at that point.
I've got some quite strict rules, personal rules around privacy. So there are certain things that I don't do and certain things that I'm quite happy to do. So for example, I don't publish videos or photographs of my children, but I talk a lot on my social media about being a mum. But I don't, I don't talk about them individually and personally. I talk about being a wife, but I don't post photos of my husband, and I don't tend to share their names. And so I sort of have various privacies around that. And I also around whereabouts I actually video and where I'm on Zoom. So for example, at the moment, you can see a lovely white screen behind me, which is a plank wall. What you can't see is the mess in front of me that I can see. And so I am quite careful about where in my home I allow social media videos to be taken, and also where in the church as well. Most of my social media is recorded in the church building, and I am careful about the camera angle. So for example, when we're leading our services, the camera is only on those who are leading. The camera is not pointed at the congregation. And when we have times, for example, during communion, where the congregation will come up to receive their communion, we switch the video off and we put a notice up on saying, the camera has been switched off to maintain people's privacy. And when we have our children who come out to the front during worship and they show everybody what they've done at Sunday school or whatever they're doing, we do the same again. So we switch the camera off. It's not ideal, but it's a good way of balancing the two things, because people need to feel free and comfortable to come to worship without them feeling that they're going to be on YouTube and on Facebook, and they actually just need to feel free to worship themselves.
And I think those conversations have to be had with congregations, and not just assume people get that, oh, well, you're going to be on YouTube. Like because some people just don't care. They're not worried about it. And others won't come to the church specifically because they're worried about their face being all over the internet. And so I think communities have to have discussions around what are our norms and expectations.
Yeah. And I think we're figuring this all out in real time.
Oh, yeah.
And so that there's not a set of guidelines for this stuff. So it's messy.
And comment earlier about communication made me think about my contact to St. Ambrose when we were in lockdown and doing live stream only. One parishioner came up with this idea of a virtual pew. She was in Raleigh. Her daughter was in Charlotte, which is 3 hours west of us, and her mother was in Long Island, New York. And they would watch us on YouTube and call on the phone, conference call, and engage while the service was happening. And that was the answer to an issue I had, or concern I had, with my teenage families that had teenagers, 8th, 9th, 10th grade. Parents said, I cannot get my children to watch church on TV. They think it's crazy. They'd rather be in person. Who wouldn't rather be in person? And so that virtual pew idea made me think about a virtual gaming experience. And so what we did is we took the virtual pew, translated it to our teenage group. They would watch on YouTube or through a separate medium, engage with each other. The participation of our teenagers increased, and actually we exceeded our Sunday school attendance. So the virtual pew and virtual gaming experience has at least worked at St. Ambrose, Raleigh.
That's great. And talk to me when you have virtual pew rents. That's what I'm waiting for. But it's true. I mean, some of these things were actually more effective. I think about when we were exclusively online for those 62 weeks. The prayers of the people. Now, I'm at a New England congregation. During the prayers of the people, no one's yelling out prayers, right? It's kind of stiff upper lip stuff. But in the chat, people are going crazy, and we're praying for all sorts of people, and that was something that really built community during that time in a really beautiful way.
We're near the top of the hour, and wanted to give an opportunity for any of the panelists to answer any more questions or leave with parting words. I know Dr. Campbell needs to sign off soon. I'll begin with you if you have anything you want to say or close with.
I just want to say thank you for having me today. I think there's been some great conversation, and you know, these issues of how we adapt to social media. A lot of the things and debates that people have raised are things that people talked about with television and religion, and the radio and religion. And so I think we have a great history as in different church traditions of how we've responded to previous media, the things that we've seen as positive and the things we've seen as negative. And I think, you know, learning our history of how we, you know, as a church have negotiated those kind of things can help us in moving forward, especially in kind of embracing the positive uses of technology. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Heidi. Anyone else? Well, thank you for joining this discussion. Do check out the SEEP Network and the Hard Edge Network on social media for this and other digital workshops. And I leave you with salam and shalom. Peace.